GEM International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. GEM International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jordan Bateman, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the website taxpayer.com. Happy New Year and welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Hey, thanks, Jim, and Happy New Year to you and all your listeners.
What kind of tax hikes are we looking at this new year?
Oh, there's a whole bevy of tax increases. But, let's start with a little good news first. After several years of increases, the federal government's actually cutting employment insurance premiums. This could save the average worker as much as $140 this year, although most people will kind of be in the $50 to $60 range. But, you got to give credit where credit's due. Finally, someone at least is reducing the tax burden. But unfortunately, what the federal government give us, the provinces and cities are taking away. And we're seeing increases to MSP for a big swath of people. We're seeing major increases to Hydro, to ICBC, to BC Ferries, to TransLink, and then, of course, our city property taxes. So most people will fall further and further behind thanks to all these different tax grabs.
Why do governments not realize there's just one taxpayer? They seem to think that 8% here, 10% there is okay.
Yeah, this is my frustration with these levels of government. And, the BC Liberals actually in one of their budgets a couple of years ago talked about the one taxpayer principle, and it doesn't seem to trickle out to their crown corporation. So, I think you and I would agree that, if this year all we faced was a $50 a year BC Hydro increase, most people could probably scrimp and save and find a way to afford that. The problem is that $50 BC Hydro increase comes on the heels of a similar increase last year and the year before, so it's compounded. But it also comes with a $60 ICBC increase, and for some people a $168 MSP increase, or $150 property tax increase, and all of a sudden that's all added up. And so even if you're lucky enough to get a modest raise, it's more than taken up by the new taxes, fees, and levies.
And of course, governments tell us the inflation rate's roughly 2%. But conveniently, several years ago, they decided that housing and fuel shouldn't be counted because they were, quote, too volatile. Well, in Vancouver, of course, you have the highest housing prices in the country, and we have the highest gasoline prices in the country, yet they don't count when it comes to asking for a pay raise.
Yeah, quite correct. They don't count. And, the housing cost is a big factor, and one that we've, you and I have talked about several times on this show about, why doesn't government realize their own role in housing prices? And why don't they realize that, these housing prices are consuming more of our after-tax income, and, how are we supposed to make all these ends meet? So definitely frustrating to see that they still have not gotten the message. And then gasoline prices, I got a little bone to pick on this. We're seeing major increases across the Lower Mainland right now in gas prices. They blame it on strong demand in the United States. And yet, I look at prices across the line in Blaine and Bellingham. Prices have not gone up there. So, there's something fishy going on when it comes to gas prices.
And of course, too, we do have a Chevron refinery in Burnaby, and I can see the smoke coming up from the refinery right outside my window here in Burnaby. They don't seem to stop. They're going 24 hours a day. How can we be short gas?
Yeah, that's a good point. There is, fuel demand does go up and down during different times of year. I think we all understand that. May long weekend kind of kicking off, everyone's driving vacations, demand goes up. We understand that. And then a couple of notable refineries in the U.S. that did supply part of the gas to Canada have had major problems. One had a fire, and one's having to have a major rebuild. But still, it doesn't sit right. And oftentimes these increases seem incredibly arbitrary.
What's your position on carbon taxes?
Well, the carbon tax, or variations of it, have come in Ontario and Alberta as of January 1st. Very concerning. So in Ontario, we're seeing a rash of what's called energy poverty. Energy costs there are far higher than here in BC, thanks to some really boneheaded billion-dollar blunders by the Kathleen Wynne government. Now they've added carbon tax to it, and you're seeing people having to choose. Am I going to pay my power bill, or am I going to put groceries on the table? Are we going to be able to get clothes for the kids, or are we going to have enough electricity? So energy poverty is becoming a bigger issue in Ontario, which is probably good for all of the country because, of course, so much media is driven from Ontario that maybe it'll get us talking about energy issues here. And then in Alberta, people were rushing to the gas pumps on December 31st to fill up their cars, fill up their portable fuel cans, all that stuff, in order to avoid or put off at least having to pay the carbon tax for as long as possible. And, you're starting to see, natural gas bills being posted there showing, basically the equivalent of a 33% tax rate, because natural gas is so cheap, but carbon tax isn't reliant on price, it's reliant on the emissions. So, I think as people are forced to pay this, more people are forced to pay this across the country, and without the same kind of revenue neutrality tools that were used to sort of buy off certain groups here in BC, I think we're going to hear a lot more complaints about carbon taxes.
Well, does a carbon tax make sense in the coldest country in the world with the greatest distances between its major cities, and the fact that Canada altogether perhaps produces 1% of the world's greenhouse gases? If we all stop driving tomorrow and heating our homes tomorrow, it's not going to make one blip of a difference in the world's climate.
Oh, you're exactly right. Canada could cease to exist tomorrow, and I guess 1.5% of the world's emissions would disappear. But that certainly isn't going to heal the oceans or slow the rise of or slow glacial melts, anything like that. And that's been part of our argument. Look, until you get China and India and the United States on board, it doesn't make sense. It's even worse for Canadians because the Americans have outright said, the Trump and GOP administrations, that we're not going to bring in a carbon tax, which means we lose our economic competitiveness. You're better off to get rid of the carbon tax, go hard to make your economy competitive and grow, and then use the money from that to actually, kind of mitigate against any effects of climate change. That would be the smarter way to go, but it's not the one that our politicians want to take.
Well, yes, and I would be in favor of a tax if it did something like improve public transit so you get people out of cars, but there's no promise from any government to do that.
No, and the truth is they know that public transit actually does very little to improve carbon emissions. In the United States, in Seattle, they had a major referendum. They're building, it's an outrageous number. It's like $45 billion over 20 years worth of transit infrastructure in and around Seattle. But, they're basically playing, what would normally cost about $1 to reduce as far as a certain amount of carbon. It's actually costing them far more than that. So, it's not a very effective way to reduce the carbon footprint because people forget all that transit runs on, or usually, trolley wires withstanding, usually run on fossil fuels and those cause their own emissions.
What about the West Coast Express? I heard the subsidy there is so high that you could actually buy every passenger a compact car every year.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't checked the West Coast Express subsidy lately, so I'm not sure of that exact number. But yes, it is quite high. The number has gone up, and it's not been a terribly effective service. They're having more and more trouble navigating the freight lines because, of course, CP owns that line, and they use it to move freight around, and so more and more of these trains are delayed. And you kind of wonder about the long-term future of West Coast Express simply because you now have the Evergreen line stretching into Coquitlam. That's a big chunk of the people who used to take the West Coast Express. If you had a dedicated bus from Mission to Coquitlam Center, for example, would that be a more cost-effective way of moving those people? Certainly wouldn't be as glamorous and as comfortable for those folks. But you do wonder if at some point TransLink may decide West Coast Express is more trouble than it's worth.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, getting back to TransLink, they decided this winter it wasn't worth the cost of putting snow tires on their buses. And this is after, of course, the police are advising people not to drive in the Lower Mainland because the roads are in atrocious shape once you get off the main arteries. What about the liability for the folks, the million people or so a day who take transit and rely on that bus to be in good shape?
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about liability. There's been a storm of tweets today about, people who haven't shoveled their walks and, the city should come in and fine everyone who hasn't shoveled their walk. Meanwhile, people are on, public sidewalks, that are, owned by the government and they're completely impassable. You're seeing ice on major roads. You're seeing TransLink, hopelessly ill-equipped to deal with it. Why would we beat up on the public when our supposed wise political masters couldn't be bothered to be prepared either? So, for TransLink, it's a tough one, right? I mean, you're talking about, for a fleet that size, probably millions of dollars worth of preparation, switching over tires and whatnot, for a city that, until this year, we hadn't had snow since, for 2 or 3 years. So, I'm sure they're kind of weighing that out, and today they look foolish, but, tomorrow we may have forgotten it.
Well, yeah, it's amazing TransLink thinking about costs at all.
Yes, that is correct. TransLink is not exactly known for its smart fiscal decisions. So you're right, it may not be a cost thing as much as it's just a pure laziness thing. Yeah,
and if you did get the winter tires, if you only needed them for 1 month, they're good for years. You can store them,
Yeah, well, that is true. That is true. And, you could at least prioritize certain routes where there are going to be hills. Seeing those pictures of 3 or 4 buses with their sorry out of service signs on them as they're sliding down hills, it's pretty scary, I think. And, you're right. There could be a priority given to some of these routes.
Now, here we are in British Columbia, the highest real estate prices in Canada. And so many people are getting their assessment notices from the government, and they are shocked.
Yeah, so assessments across the Lower Mainland up, depending on where you live, between 30 and 50%. I know I gasped audibly when I looked at ours because it was up significantly. But what people need to do is, before you panic, you need to find out in your city what is the average home increase. Because it doesn't matter what your raw increase is for tax purposes. It matters how you compare to the average. Mill rates are adjusted to make sure the average home pays roughly the same in taxes every year, plus the increase from city council. So as long as your house didn't go up more than average, you should be okay. Now, if your house has gone up with more than average, be prepared because, July is coming, your property taxes will be due, and you're going to owe quite a bit of money, not just more in the political decision by your council to raise taxes, but also more because your house is worth more.
Now, at 1.2 million and up, you lose your right to get a rebate on your government property tax. Should that go up?
Yeah, that will be interesting to see what the Liberals do with this because it's not tied to any formula, this grant. So it's not like the rate of inflation or the rate of the assessed values going up, it automatically triggers that threshold to move. It takes a political decision by cabinet to make that threshold move. So, my suspicion is, the increase is going to be so outrageous and the public are going to be very concerned about them. And so many people will lose that benefit that, cabinet will act and increase the threshold, but it does take a political decision and it won't happen unless, we start kind of ringing the bell now and calling for that fairness.
Should the BC government be digging into their coffers to give new home buyers $37,500 to go towards their down payment.
No, this is really terrible economic policy, and anyone who's not on the payroll of a real estate company or the provincial government itself will tell you that, economically this doesn't make sense. It drives up demand at the lower end of the spectrum, which then drives up the cost of those homes. It would not be surprised. We would not be surprised to see entry-level homes jump by, about $37,500 because all of a sudden more people have that money. So the economic state's bad. The personal anecdotes, certain people will benefit from it, and I guess, good for them. But there's a reason why economists think this is a bad program. It's because it's going to have unintended consequences, which will end up costing more people more money.
Also, on $37,000, if a real estate agent gets a 7% commission, that amounts to a $2,600 bribe from the government to vote Liberal, doesn't it?
Yes, well, it is a nice way to make peace with the real estate industry, who have been beaten up a little bit by various governments, I guess, this year or last year, 2016. You're exactly right. I mean, hey, that's a good angle I hadn't thought of, but the whole thing right now is we're in an election cycle, and the provincial government's been very clear what their plan is. It's, find out what people are upset about and try to mollify them. Use the big surplus to essentially pay them off. This is just one of those issues. You can combine this with the foreign home buyers tax, and they'll hope that people who David Eby's been riling up against housing prices, we'll give them a pass and vote Liberal.
Well, the foreign buyers tax, to me, seems largely aimed at the Chinese community. Isn't this a bit racist?
Well, certainly some people think so, but then you have people like Ian Young in the South China Morning Post, who's written a lot on this, who think it's an important piece of the overall puzzle. I just say there's so many loopholes around it still that anyone who really wants to invest from overseas can find a way of doing it without incurring that tax. Or, these people are so incredibly wealthy that the tax doesn't matter anyways, and you could tax it at 50% and it wouldn't make a difference.
Right. And getting back to the medical services premium, BC is the only province that charges it. And apart from people who are in the abject, most lowest poverty-ridden area of the income level, it does not take into account your ability to pay and how much money you make.
No, exactly. So I think it's $45,000 now or $40,000. Anyone over that threshold pays roughly the same. This year, MSP, we're seeing big increases for couples without children. If you're a couple without children making $45,000 a year or more, you're going to pay $168 more in MSP this year. It's a big increase. If you're seniors and together you earn $51,000 in your various pensions and investments, you will also see a $168 increase in your MSP tax this year. That's not insignificant, especially on top of a 40% increase over the past 5 years in MSP. So that's a tax. It's been very unpopular. It's grown. I think its unpopularity grows by the day, and the Liberals, I think, are going to try to address it one more time before they go into the election.
Wow, seniors getting hit. So in other words, if you own a house and a car, if you're heating it, if you're driving, you're turning your lights on, and you want to get service from a doctor, people who have no children really are getting nailed, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, think of it this way, right? If you're a senior couple, and let's say through your pensions and whatnot, you make $52,000 a year, but you're living in a property that you bought, 35 years ago and has skyrocketed past that $1.2 million threshold. Well, it's great. You've lost your $600 home buyer's grant, homeowner's grant. You've lost, you're paying $168 more a month in MSP. If you share a car, it's $60 more a month from ICBC. You're heating your house, it's $50 more a year from BC Hydro. EI, the change there doesn't affect you at all. So, all of a sudden you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of dollars more that you have to pay this year than last.
Is this a dangerous policy area for the BC Liberals, considering baby boomers are still a big chunk of the population?
Yeah, we've got to remember, the older you are, the more likely you are to vote. And in fact, more people, I think, what's the weird stat? More people over the age of 85 voted provincially last time than people under the age of 25, right? So even though there are far more people aged 18 to 25, far more came out to vote over the age of 85. So, be careful if you're the BC Liberals. You don't want to poke these seniors too much because they may end up poking back.
Well, I posted on my own personal Facebook, the fact that MSP premiums, according to a release that a friend gave me, more money is raised by the BC Liberals from MSP premiums than from major corporate taxes.
Yeah, it's about the same, about $2.5 billion. That to me, though, shows a little bit more about the weakness of our corporate income levels than it does about MSP. You gotta remember too, MSP is slightly inflated by governments paying it on behalf of their own employees. Every school district, every hospital board, every regional health board, every university, the provincial government, every city hall pays these benefits on behalf of their staff. At the very least 50% and usually 100%. So it's government taking with their left hand and putting money in their right hand, but that inflates the bottom line, and people think, oh, $2.5 billion, how would we ever recover that? Well, for all we know, $700 million of that could be just pure government shuffling money from one account to the other.
And I'm also thinking too, retired or about to retire baby boomers, they're going to see that impact as well in their bottom line.
Yeah, most baby boomers, even if you've been lucky enough to have an employer pay it, you quit working, usually the MSP bill isn't covered by your pension or your retirement package. So, more people will be getting MSP bills every year, unless the government does something to get rid of them. Yeah,
there will be more raging grannies than ever.
Yes. And again, those are the people who vote, and they vote in higher numbers and turnout. They've been very faithful BC Liberal voters since 2001. But all it takes is one issue to galvanize them, one voice, the Donald Trump approach, right? And anything can happen.
Well, take a look. They thought that the referendum on the HST would fail because of the rigorous rules to get a referendum done. And yet we don't have an HST anymore.
Oh, exactly. Governments always like to underestimate the strength of the people. Last year we saw that over and over again around the world that, the experts and the elites, had one view of what was going on in the world and the people had a different one. So, it could change at any time. You can turn on a dime. And, I think that's why the BC Liberals are rightly nervous about this election.
Well, isn't it also true in BC about 5% of the electorate makes the difference between forming or losing a government?
Yeah, I think there's, probably 20 ridings that actually swing. Most of the rest are set between the Liberals and the NDP. There'll be 20 or 25 ridings at the most that make the biggest, difference. And, the question is, can the NDP snag, were they down 5 or 6 seats and there's 2 new ones, so they need to be +7 or +8 out of those 25. It's not out of the realm of possibility. So, that's why the BC Liberals in 2013 put so much money into polling those swing ridings, basically ignoring the safe NDP ridings and ignoring the safe Liberal ridings. And I'm sure the NDP have learned from that successful formula and are going to do the same themselves.
And with the $37,000 plus new home buyer down payment thing, they said, oh, well, we just thought of that, but how come TV ads supporting it were out like seconds after the announcement?
Well, I mean, they had a well-coordinated launch. And when you have the resources of government, you can do things very, very quickly when you want to. It's just amazing it takes so long to get anything done. And it always shows you what they really think are the important priorities, because they're the ones that happen very quickly.
Yes, and Christy Clark has yet to put in the 500 treatment beds for drug addiction she promised 5 years ago.
Yeah, and that could be a very powerful issue if John Horgan and David Eby and those NDPers can connect that to the emotionally to the everyday family, the everyday voter. Take it from being the downtown East Side's issue to being all British Columbians' issue. That could be a very, very powerful way to move votes. Right,
and also I remember doctors at Royal Columbian a few years ago were tired of people actually having to wait in the Tim Hortons because their emergency rooms were overcrowded. They were going to bring in one of those emergency portable hospitals from Calgary and put it up on the front lawn of Royal Columbian Hospital, but I think they were told if you do that, we're going to pull your accreditation as doctors.
I do not remember that story, but, look, the government always holds the hammer in these things. So, when governments are doing well and the economy is doing well, there is a sense that we should invest some of that money into things like healthcare and education. The question is, how will the Liberals do that while still trying to pay down the debt and keeping the budget balanced?
What about a drug program for pharmaceutical drugs? Saskatchewan, for example, the province buys all the prescription drugs, and all you pay is a dispensing fee. And if government is to be there, to keep expenses down for the average person, not just their expenses, but everybody's, would that make more sense for it to be done nationally, or should BC be part of that?
Yeah, I'm a little reluctant on a national pharmacare program, only because I've never seen the federal government deliver anything in a cost-efficient manner. So there have been lots of promises of federal programs that were going to save everyone money, and they never, ever do. So I'm not as keen or as high on the big savings being possible as other people are. But in this day and age, look, everything's got to be on the table when it comes to taxes and fees and levies. I think there's easier fruit for government to pick than to try to launch a national pharmacare program. Easier ways to save people money, but look, I'm not going to say no to any idea that may end up saving folks some dough.
Sure. Well, just the bottom line, of course, I think governments forget that they're supposed to be serving the people who elected them. We're not supposed to be their vassals and servants.
Yeah, that is exactly true. We're the bosses. Their jobs are up for grabs in 4 years, or every 4 years. We're coming up to that provincially, and it's up to the public to make sure that if they're not happy, they get out and vote and make the changes that are necessary.
Yeah, don't sit on your hands next election.
No, exactly. And I don't think, I don't sense that a bunch of NDPers stayed home last time because they were so confident they were going to win. But at the same time, everyone needs to make sure that the things that are important to them are being addressed by the politicians. And there are all candidates meetings. There is heightened media attention because of the election, and now's the chance to get your issue out there.
Well, I seem to recall last election, the Liberals didn't go to the all candidates meetings.
Some did. Yeah, some did and some didn't. But they went to some all candidates meetings and not others. Some all candidates meetings, to be honest, are run by groups that are basically the satellite of various political parties. And I don't really, think of those as being terribly fair or whatnot. So I don't really worry about that. But, the kind of basic, nonpartisan ones, I think most of the Liberals went to those.
Well, one thing I really disliked about Stephen Harper as Prime Minister was the way he would not answer reporters' questions. When he was here during the Olympics, he held dozens of photo ops. I was kicked out of a photo op, although I was just armed with a camera, because I might ask a question. Our new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, at least you'll find he does not avoid answering questions. He likes being amongst the public and reporters. And for that, no matter what his decisions are, I give him full marks.
Yeah, certainly he loves the camera. the guy loves pictures taken of him, so it doesn't seem to be a problem there. At the same time, look, Trudeau didn't bother to come out here for weeks after the pipeline decision was announced. I'm curious how the environmental side, the Kai Nagatas of the world, the wilderness committees of the world, where they're going to go and how they're going to hold him to account. He broke a promise to them, a succinct promise not to approve it. So we'll have to wait and see. It's easy to come out in controlled media environments with some fawning people around, but it's another thing to actually have hard press conferences on days where you've made tough decisions.
Jordan, I hope you have the best new year ever.
Yeah, 2017. I think it's going to be a good year. I think it's going to be interesting politically, and I think it's a chance to really push some issues like MSP and ICBC into the public's consciousness and maybe, just maybe, get some positive change going.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, the website taxpayer.com. You're listening to the Goddard Report. Any comments or questions can be emailed to info@howstreet.com. I am Jim Goddard. Have a great day.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.